I'm Cynthia James, and this network is about changing lives one woman at a time. Welcome to Women Awakening. I'm your host, Cynthia James, and I'm very grateful that I get to be with you every week and introduce you to women that inspire me, women that are change makers, women that are powerful and dynamic in their own right, because they're way showers. They're showing us all that there's a lot of possibility and potentiality here that we get to step into that field. So I hope you will subscribe, come back every week and meet a new woman. We're on Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, Spreaker, Amazon, and on video and YouTube. So also you can go to cynthiajames.net. That's my website where you can sign up for my newsletter and find out all the great gifts I have for you. I'm really excited about my guest today. Her name is Brooke Warner, and she is the publisher of She Writes Press and president of Warner Coaching, Inc., where she coaches writers to publications, right? She's passionate about books and helping writers finish their books and get published. She's been in the publishing industry for 23 years, including 8 years as the executive editor at CO Press. I mean, she has really guided women from idea to publishing and past their stuff, past their procrastination and their saboteurism and being afraid to step out, right? Plus, she's got a fabulous TEDx talk called Green Light Revolution. She has a popular weekly podcast for writers called Write, WRITE Minded, Weekly Inspiration for Writers, and she co-hosts that with Grant Faulkner. What I counted was 4 books that she's written while she's doing all the rest of this stuff. But this is what makes me the happiest. She's my publisher too. So I am so grateful to have you here, Brooke. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Cynthia. I'm thrilled.
So I want to start with where you came from. How did you grow up?
Oh, well, I grew up in Southern California in Orange County, of all places. And I had a very sweet childhood, very beach centric. But I was kind of agitated by the time I got to high school, just wanted a bigger world. I wanted to break out. It was a slow suburban kind of upbringing. But a pretty stable childhood. My parents are divorced, but on good terms. And then, after I graduated and grew up, I just wanted to launch myself into the bigger world. And that's kind of when I started having, the experiences that I was seeking.
Yeah. And so have you always loved to write?
I would say I love to read. That's why I got into book publishing, not so much because I was driven by writing. Of course, like a lot of kids, I had moments, where I had a friend who was a poet and we wrote poetry together and things like that. But I really got into book publishing for my love of books and my love of reading.
Okay. And so, the New York publishing world is big and intense.
Yes.
And where did you start? I mean, how did you get started there?
Well, I didn't ever go to New York. So I mean, at various points in my career, I've tried to go to New York, and then I just kept getting pulled back to California.
Okay.
I mean, I'm a California girl, and so when I looked for a job in publishing, I actually did look in San Francisco because it was far enough from my roots of Southern California, but close enough to my family. And San Francisco really, I mean, Chicago and San Francisco both are sort of second to New York City for being publishing enclaves. And then I landed a job in Berkeley, and actually Berkeley has a pretty thriving publishing space as well. And I've been here the whole time. I never let these 23 years have all been in Berkeley. I've only worked at Berkeley Publishers, and She Writes is established as a Berkeley publisher. So I found a home here, and, it's not that intensity. We call it like left coast publishing, because it has a different vibe than Manhattan publishing for sure.
Okay. So where did you start? Because at some point, you're like a big editor, but where did you start?
I started at North Atlantic Books, which is a small indie here in Berkeley and run by, at the time, a husband and wife. But North Atlantic is a mid-sized publisher. You know, at the time that I worked there, we were publishing about 90 books a year, which was substantive. And I got my start there. It's funny because I was half customer service and half editor. Like that's the job description they gave me. And then after like 3 months, my boss pulled me aside and said, you know, your talent is not answering the phones, and I'm going to make you a full-time editor. And I was like, yay. I wasn't trying to sabotage myself. I was like, yeah, I don't really want to answer the phone, you know? So then I became a junior editor. But my real break came when I left that job for Seal Press, because that was where I found a home, you know, working with women writers exclusively. Seal is a feminist, women-centric press. And I loved everything about it. I mean, it was just a dream job for me. And that was absolutely eventually the catalyst that led me to start She Writes.
So I want to talk about that because the way I was introduced to you was one of your authors said, go listen to her TED Talk. And so I did. So I want to talk about that because in it, you know, you were talking about it's called the Green Light Revolution, but talk to us about what that is and what catapulted you into the creation of She Writes Press.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of make the point in the TEDx talk that She Writes Press is my own version of a green light revolution, you know, that I was saying yes to myself by starting this press, because the whole idea of traditional publishing is basically about exclusivity. It's about keeping people out. You know, it has to function in that way to some extent, but I think the parameters that the traditional publishers use to decide which books get published are kind of messed up parameters. It's not often about the book itself. It's more about the author and the author platform and, you know, the author's celebrity. So that's what I'm taking to task in the TEDx talk, you know, just saying this really should not be the measure. And as a green lighter, it's someone who is going to say yes to themselves, someone who has come to a point where they're being barred from the traditional space. And that can be, you know, I made the analogy to music or art or whatever it might be, filmmaking. Yet in these other industries, there's a lot more celebration of indie artists, right? Whereas in the book publishing space, you're often marginalized for being independent. I do think that has changed in the last 10 years dramatically. And I think I've been part of that movement to make that change, because I talk a lot in the talk about finding the validation from within. You know, when you have a good book, you know, you don't necessarily need an editor at a big house to say yes or no, but that's a journey, and every single author is different in terms of when and if they get there and what their publishing journey is.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting because it's how I got to you, because I had an experience with a large publisher, and I really thought that I was evolved, right? It's like, you know, if one door closes, another door opens and stuff, but it really hit some core within me. And it was, I think, my own awakening to, can I open to myself? Can I green light myself? And so when I came to you, it was such a joy to have somebody get who I am and what I'm doing. And all of the women, that I have met that are She Write Press authors say the same thing about you and this organization.
Oh, thank you.
So I want to talk about your coaching business. When do you have time to do that?
Well, I don't coach a ton. You know, I'll probably on a given week, I might see 4 to 5 authors. And I just like it though, because I like staying in the trenches. You know, I like the process of working with authors, and I didn't want to let that go. And so, yeah, I definitely am busy and I'm selective about who I take on. But the one-on-one coaching is meaningful work. You know, it's as you know, and it's like, it's got this therapeutic element, and the really getting in there with the manuscript in ways that the press is not really set up for me to do. I'm kind of admin at the press, very high level, which is appropriate for the job description that I have. But I like, just that kind of work with authors that I've done my entire career.
So when they come into you and they've got excuses and they've been sitting on this writing for 5 years and they're terrified to go forward, tell me, what kind of process do you do with them?
Well, I think a lot of times by the time someone decides that they're ready to hire a coach, they're ready to kick their own butt a little bit. It's just you're going to put the money and the energy and the time into something. And so people might be scared. I think the biggest thing that I offer is accountability and compassion, just to say, look, we're going to solve this problem together. The problem might be, like you said, you're not doing the work. The problem might be that the manuscript is flawed in some way that we need to see our way through. So I don't get a whole lot of people who I'm working with who are just paralyzed in fear. I do think it comes up, and I teach memoir classes, and I know fear is a big one that comes up for memoirists because it's so self-exposing, and there's a lot of fear of fallout and hurting people and all of these things. So I do deal with fear in that context, but I also love the counterpart to that, which is just the excitement that authors bring and the measured progress in their work. And I think when you're working with a coach, you feel that more fundamentally because you're showing up and you're submitting.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you're in this really nice position at Seal Press, and then you decide to start your own business. Any fear in it?
Oh my gosh. A lot of fear to leave that job. Plus, everybody was like, you must be crazy. Like, why would you leave one of the best jobs in publishing? Because when you start going up the echelon in book publishing, there's not very many places to go. If you're an executive editor, the only job above you pretty much is publisher. And so I was not at all at some kind of ceiling, but it was a great job, and a job that any of my peers would have wanted in the publishing industry. And I was working with famous authors and people that I loved, all of these feminist women who were role models to me. So yes, I was scared. I was scared to leave because I was like, this is a cool job and it has a lot of prestige. And I was also scared because of the money. I was like, I'm jumping into an unknown, and I, had expenses and other things going on, of course. So I prepared myself. I mean, part of the reason that I had the coaching business was that, that was the safety net for me, because I knew at least I would have a baseline of income from doing the coaching. And the publishing did not pay me for the first 3 years. I did not, as many people do their passion projects. I'm just grateful that I didn't have to like bring in a venture capitalist or something. I was self-financed, but I didn't pay myself a salary.
Well, yeah. So, ladies, I hope you're listening, because whenever you start anything, you're not going to leap into success in the first 6 months, usually.
Right.
So I guess I want to know, now you've worked in this publishing house, right? And you're starting from scratch your own thing. What called you to do that?
That is an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, it's what you were saying earlier, that inner knowing. I wanted to not be confined to the decision making of traditional publishing anymore. I was fed up, and I have been motivated in my life by injustice and unfairness and anger. I don't think those are bad things to be motivated by. And I've been kind of a fighter, especially once I got started and I realized there was a stigma attached to it. And I was like, no, I will not accept this. So I think a lot of my energy came from that place, right? So it was a calling, but it was also like this is not fair, and I'm going to prove it. And so I mean, it's astounding to me, because I think always when you look back, you're like, wow, I took that leap. I was fearless. I don't think I'm as fearless today as I was 12 years ago. Your life changes, and you can grow roots a little bit and get a little tense sometimes. So I guess I'm just glad I did it then.
Yeah, well, me too. And did you decide that She Writes was going to be for women because of where you had come from? Was that part of the calling?
That was part of it. And also, so shewrites.com already existed, and I was friends with the founder of that site. It was basically a writing salon. It was kind of like a Huffington Post site for women writers. And I knew Kami because we intersected at when I was at Seal, and I had asked her to blurb a couple of books. And I wanted to continue in women's publishing. I loved everything about Seal except the corporate part. I loved the books we were publishing. I loved working with women writers. And so I envisioned a female press, and I knew how to do that. But it just was an obvious partnership with Kami because She Writes, and it was already a huge brand. And so that was probably the smartest thing I ever did, right? Is that I like hitched myself to her star because She Writes was already a thing. I didn't have to create it. I just created the press on top of an existing platform.
Yeah. Well, okay. So where did you learn the administrative part of this? Not just from where you started, but I've been watching you grow and have to change as you're growing. Where did you learn that?
Well, I can tell you learn a lot from mistakes.
Okay.
I'm sure you know. And I have made a lot of mistakes and also just been astounded by how much I did not know about publishing before I started She Writes. I thought, oh, well, I've been in publishing for 13 years. I know a ton of stuff. No, I was like a baby toddler mind in terms of what the industry is. And so I have learned from like the hard way. I think that's just what happens when you get into your business, and then you lose a little money here, people get pissed off at you there, you make a misstep, you do this or that, and it's like constantly curbing, and I think one of my bigger strengths is that I do acknowledge the errors. I am like, this happened, I'm sorry, I'm working to fix it, or I just ate a $20,000 loss, whatever the things are that happen. And then you have to just get back up again. And then you learn and you don't do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart, for sure. You're a mom too, huh?
I have a 12-year-old boy. Yep.
Yes. And how are you balancing having this 12-year-old and running these two businesses?
Well, like every mom during COVID, I lost my mind. It was awful. I cannot tell you the worst year ever. Just being a mom to a kid who is on Zoom school and trying to run a business is ridiculous. But I also know people who had many more children than me who are doing the same, and it's just hard. The balance is a constant thing. I think I'm lucky to have one. It's easier to balance one, and I have an amazing community, and so I have a lot of support, but I have really cultivated that support in order to have flexibility. And I have an easy kid.
Oh, well, that's good. That's really good. So he's still in love with you.
Still, yes. I think I have like 2 years left.
So how are you at self-care?
I don't think I'm the best. I might rank myself like a B minus. I really make an effort to be with friends. I value friends and family. So I will go out for dinner or drinks over getting myself a massage or sleeping enough. So my self-care part is just it being in this generative place with people that I care about, and like stepping away from work, being with my son, shutting down the computer. That's my version of self-care. What I don't do such a good at, I'm not super good at like, oh, I'm going to take myself on a trip, or I'm going to do this, that, or the other. I hope that once I'm, have a older child, that I might do a little bit more of that.
Exactly. So what's your vision for the next 5 years?
The vision has been so steady, and I think that She Writes in particular has a really important place in the publishing industry, and that we're in a moment right now where hybrid publishing and alternative publishing is still being shaped, and even moments of backlash because the industry is so complicated. And I do think that my vision is just to stand firm and believe and know that this work is important, that we're serving a really important audience, continuing to attract amazing female writers, and just doing what we do best. Because like at the end of my career, if I am lucky enough to do this for another 25 years, that's my legacy. And I don't think it's about striving necessarily for more. For me, it's really about keeping a steady pace. And it's why we also put a cap on our submissions. We're not trying to grow. We're actually trying to stay steady and just do what we already do really well. And my legacy, I hope, will be that I have carved out a meaningful space here in hybrid publishing that other people will say, hybrid publishing is the real deal, and look to seal she writes because they're doing it right. So
Well, so let me just say, as one of your authors, the integrity of your business and your communication from internally to the author through all the different things is quite a beautiful thing. When I hear horror stories about some places that aren't doing the best job or supporting people, so it's a wonderful, I feel like, gift to be with you and the work that you're doing. And so I guess I just want to know, aside from publishing, what's your passion?
Well, I'm a runner. I run a lot, probably like 4 days a week, sometimes more. So I've always run since I was young. That's probably the strongest in terms of one of my identities. And like I said, I mean, the passion of just being a mom, and having a big job and trying to have fun, like to get out in the world, right? Hiking, traveling. My son is super into soccer, so I'll go down and kick the ball with him at the park, so just trying to be in the world, but moving my body and getting out of this office is a high priority and a big passion.
That's beautiful. So how do people find you?
SheWritesPress.com is a site for the publishing, and I have BrookeWarner.com, which is my personal stuff, and my coaching, and my TEDx talk is there. So pretty easy to find. And thank you, Cynthia. What a great conversation.
Well, I love it. So this is the last question. I always ask the guests the same last question. The show is called Women Awakening. What do you think is the most important thing about women awakening on the planet in this moment?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think I always see this trajectory, of like the forward motion and then the pushback on us, right? Like we go a few steps ahead and then we get pushed back on, and this is for any marginalized community, of course. And so I think we just have to always remember to own the greatness and to not listen to the naysayers and to just continue to pursue what we're doing. I mean, I see this work that I'm doing as like, it's not like you're getting accolades every day. It's not like you're getting a whole bunch of pats on the back, but then like 10 years down the road, you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, I made a real difference here. And so I think this kind of steadiness and this internal validation that I talk about in the TEDx talk that is really important to cultivate, not especially in the work that we do, you're just not getting that external validation all the time, and that can't be your motivation. So I think this awakening is really about like owning how awesome we are and not feeling bad to say so sometimes.
Love it. Well, thank you for being here. I'm really, really, I'm grateful to know you and to walk this path with you.
Me too, Cynthia. Thank you.
Okay, ladies, I'm going to say the same thing I say to you every week in a different form. Hey, you are magnificent. You are dynamic. You are mighty. There's nobody else like you. So you come here to do something nobody else can do. This is the time to claim it, explore it, step into that place within you that wants to thrive, that wants to grow, that wants to learn and discover who you are. The world is waiting, and I'm so honored to walk this path with you. Love you, and I'll see you soon.